Flight attendant kicks black woman's bag. 30 minutes later, she buys the whole airline. The kick wasn't hard, but it was deliberate. The toe of the flight attendant's polished black shoe connected with the edge of the sleek art case, sending it sliding a few feet down the aisle like a piece of forgotten trash. Layla Carter froze, her 13-year-old hands still outstretched, as if trying to catch what had already slipped away. Her voice, small and stunned, cracked the hum of boarding passengers. "You kicked my bag." The sentence wasn't angry. It was broken. Disbelief dripped from every syllable, like a cup spilling too fast to stop. Shannon Parker didn't even flinch. She rolled her eyes as she turned back toward the other passengers jostling for overhead space, her tone clipped and cold. "It was blocking the aisle. People need to move, sweetheart." Jasmine Carter stood behind her daughter, her hand on the handle of their small carry-on. For a moment, she didn't speak. She simply stared at Shannon, her expression unreadable. Layla's portfolio, custom-made, painted with celestial scenes and soft pastel nebulae, lay on the floor near row 21, a gray scuff already marring one corner. It had taken Layla weeks to complete those paintings. Jasmine knew because she'd watched her daughter fall asleep at the kitchen table with charcoal smudges on her cheek. Now that same child stood trembling in the aisle of a half-loaded Boeing 787, her face crumpling in slow motion. "Apologize to her," Jasmine said softly. Her voice carried a kind of stillness that turned heads. Not loud, not sharp, but commanding in a way that made nearby passengers pause mid-motion. Shannon barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, if your daughter had stored her bag correctly, this wouldn't have happened. I have a job to do." Jasmine's gaze didn't waver. "And that job includes kicking a child's artwork?" "It's just a bag," Shannon snapped. "Let's not make a scene." "It's not just a bag," Jasmine replied. "It's everything she's worked on for the last 2 months. By now, the nearby passengers had stopped completely. Phones weren't out yet, but the air had shifted. A few whispered. A few stared at the vibrant case on the floor. Most waited, unsure if they should step in. Layla knelt quietly, gathering her portfolio with shaking fingers. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just sat back in her window seat, clutching the scuffed case like it might dissolve in her hands. Jasmine placed the carry-on in the overhead bin herself, then sat down beside her daughter. "Do you want to get off the flight?" she asked gently. Layla shook her head, barely audible. "The competition's in London. I have to go." Jasmine brushed a hand over her daughter's braids. "Okay." She took a deep breath, then reached for her phone. 10 rows back, Shannon resumed her duties with stiff efficiency, calling out instructions and ignoring the quiet murmurs around her. She didn't notice that Jasmine wasn't just scrolling through messages or texting a friend. She was calling Trent. Thousands of miles away, Trent Carter was mid-sentence in a quarterly review with the M&A team at Carter Global Enterprises when his personal line vibrated. He never answered personal calls in meetings, except when it was Jasmine. "Excuse me," he said, rising from the long conference table. His tone was clipped but calm. No one questioned him. In his office, he answered with a simple, "What happened?" Jasmine's voice came through like steel wrapped in velvet. "Your daughter was just disrespected on a Sky Nova flight. A flight attendant kicked her portfolio, her artwork." There was a pause. Not silence. Trent's breath caught so quietly it barely registered, but a shift. "She what?" he asked. "She kicked it, Trent, with her foot. No apology. Told Layla it was just a bag, and the case is scuffed. Some of her drawings are bent." Trent's jaw clenched. "Is Layla okay?" "She's heartbroken," Jasmine whispered, "but she still wants to go." Another pause. "What's the flight number?" "SCAN Flight 221. JFK to Heathrow, Gate 34. Departs in 25 minutes. I'll call you back in 10. Back on the plane, Jasmine ended the call and held Layla's hand. She didn't explain anything. Not yet. She just sat there, watching her daughter breathe through the pain. 10 minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked to remain at the gate for a few extra minutes due to an unexpected delay on the ground. We'll update you shortly. The murmurs began again, this time louder. Shannon stiffened as she returned from the galley. She leaned into the intercom speaker but didn't say anything. Something felt off. Then her supervisor appeared at the cabin door. Lisa Harmon, a senior gate agent with 20 years in the game, looked unusually pale. "Shannon," she said quietly, "you need to step off the aircraft now." "What?" Shannon laughed awkwardly. "We're about to taxi. Orders from corporate." "About what?" Lisa's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're being pulled for misconduct." Shannon's face went slack. "You can't be serious?" Lisa didn't flinch. "Grab your bag." All around them, passengers watched. A few phones were up now. A teenager in row 23 was already filming. As Shannon walked down the aisle, past the seat she'd just kicked the art case into, she caught Jasmine's eyes. For the first time, she seemed to register something behind the calm, something cold, calculated, and powerful. It was the look of someone who hadn't raised her voice, because she never had to. Outside the aircraft, Trent Carter was already on a call with the interim board of Sky Nova's parent company. His acquisition team had pulled out an old file from last quarter, one that laid out the company's weaknesses, debt exposure, and its reliance on a single lender for liquidity. By the time Shannon stepped onto the jet bridge, she was no longer just a disgruntled flight attendant. She was the catalyst for a corporate implosion, and she didn't even know it yet. The door to Trent Carter's private suite swung shut behind him with a quiet click. The moment the lock engaged, his entire demeanor shifted. Gone was the calm corporate executive from the boardroom. What replaced him was a father, laser-focused, controlled, and seething beneath the surface. He opened the Carter Global Operations Terminal on his desk, eyes narrowing as he typed in 2 words, Sky Nova Airlines. In seconds, a detailed dashboard lit up. Market cap, debt-to-equity ratio, corporate structure, pending litigation, everything. Trent scanned the screen, his fingers tapping once, twice, then settling on a red-flagged report in the lower right. Operational Risk Watch List. Sky Nova had been teetering for months. A shaky refinancing deal, slipping customer satisfaction scores, and most importantly, a high-leverage position vulnerable to rapid disruption. He picked up the phone and pressed a single button. "Lena," he said to his chief of staff, "activate red signal on Sky Nova. Now." There was no hesitation. "Understood. Do you want to freeze the bond purchase schedule as well?" "Yes. Also, reroute my calls. I'll be handling this directly." Then, with the same steady rhythm, he called Jonathan Reeves, head of acquisitions. "You remember that portfolio on Sky Nova we shelved last quarter?" Trent asked. "Yeah, the Albatross file," Jonathan replied, already catching on. "You want it active again?" "No, I want it live." There was a pause. "Trent, that airline is weeks away from a liquidity breach. We move too fast, they'll smell a hostile move." "I don't care if they smell it. I want them to choke on it." Jonathan didn't ask why. He knew better. On it, back at JFK Gate 34, inside the small conference room with gray walls and a crooked clock, Shannon Parker sat stiffly in a metal chair across from Lisa Harmon and a man she didn't recognize, a corporate liaison named Brian Shaw. She crossed her arms, forcing her tone into professional neutrality. "This is completely overblown. I didn't assault anyone. I nudged a bag. The kid was blocking the aisle. Lisa folded her hands on the table. You kicked it with your foot. It's just a bag, Shannon said, teeth clenched. They're making it sound like I assaulted the Pope. Brian Shaw adjusted his glasses. That bag contained the artwork of a 13-year-old girl who was on her way to an international competition. She should have packed better. Lisa winced slightly. Shannon, the mother, filed a report. There were witnesses. A few passengers are already speaking to security. And now corporate has issued a temporary suspension pending investigation. Shannon's mouth dropped. Suspension? For what? I've worked for this airline 15 years. I've seen worse things swept under the rug. Why is this one incident? You kicked a child's art, Lisa said flatly. On camera, Brian leaned forward. And her name is Layla Carter. The name didn't register. Lisa added quietly, her mother is Jasmine Carter. Still nothing. Wife of Trent Carter. And just like that, Shannon's world tilted. No, you're making that up. Brian didn't smile. He's the largest private investor in Sky Nova's holding company. As of this morning, he initiated a series of market maneuvers that may result in a shift of board control. Shannon's blood ran cold. Are you telling me he's buying the airline? No, Brian said. Not yet, but he could. And he's moving like someone who will. Across the Atlantic, inside Carter Global's London HQ, Trent stared at the live market feed. Sky Nova's shares were dipping, just slightly, enough to whisper doubt. He called Lydia Monroe, an institutional lender who controlled a significant portion of Sky Nova's corporate bonds. Lydia, he said, what would it take for you to reconsider your position on Sky Nova's debt? There was a long pause. What happened? One of their employees kicked my daughter's art portfolio, he said plainly. That's a hell of a reason to trigger a buyout. She cried, he said, his voice taut. And I've made a decision. This isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. Lydia exhaled slowly. I assume you want to force leverage? Open up the acquisition pathway? Yes, but I'll be public about it. I want everyone to know why. And if the board resists? I'll make them watch their stock fall below junk. Give me 24 hours, she said. I can get 5 other lenders on board, but I want a seat on the new board if you go through with this. You'll have it. Trent hung up, eyes scanning the skyline. The path was forming faster than he'd expected, because it wasn't just about kicking a bag. It was about everything the world allowed to be kicked when no one thought it mattered. Meanwhile, on Flight 221, Jasmine sat quietly beside Layla, holding her daughter's hand. The delay was stretching. 40 minutes now. The other passengers were restless. A few curious eyes glanced toward them, then quickly away. Why are we still here? Layla whispered. I think someone's learning a lesson, Jasmine murmured. Suddenly, a man approached their row. He was in his 40s, in jeans and a travel hoodie. Excuse me, he said, his voice low. I saw what happened earlier. I'm sorry. I should have said something. Jasmine looked up, surprised. I didn't want to make it worse, he said, but I saw the whole thing. It was wrong. She shouldn't have treated you like that. Layla's grip tightened on her mother's hand. Thank you, Jasmine said quietly. It means more than you know. As the man returned to his seat, Layla looked up at her mother. Are people going to do anything about it? Jasmine smiled, just faintly. Oh, baby, she whispered. They already are. And 27 minutes after that bag was kicked, Sky Nova Airlines would get a phone call that would change everything. Not from a journalist, not from a government official, but from a man who didn't just write checks. He rewrote entire corporate ecosystems. Trent Carter wasn't buying an airline out of ego. He was doing it to remind the world of something simple. Some bags aren't just bags. Some kicks land louder than expected. And some people, they don't wait for justice. They make it. Captain Elijah Burke stared at the blinking message on the control panel, then glanced at his co-pilot, his brow furrowed. "Ground control's not giving us clearance," he muttered. "Something about a hold requested from executive level. That's unusual." "More than unusual," the co-pilot replied. "It's a New York to London flight. You don't just hold a 787 at gate unless there's a bomb threat or a senator on board." Burke reached for the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Apologies for the delay. We've received instructions to remain at the gate for a few additional minutes. We appreciate your patience and will keep you informed." The announcement echoed through the cabin, met with a mix of sighs and muffled groans. In business class, a man in a suit loudly complained into his phone. A toddler started crying. Overhead bins creaked as passengers adjusted bags they weren't supposed to touch anymore. In seat 22A, Layla Carter leaned against the window. She didn't speak, but her fingers traced the edge of her now dented portfolio. Jasmine, beside her, watched the cabin as if it were a chessboard, her mind moving several steps ahead. "Mom," Layla whispered, "are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, we're not." "Then why does it feel like everyone's looking at us?" Jasmine turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from Layla's cheek. "Because sometimes when you stand your ground, people notice. That's not a bad thing." Layla hesitated, then nodded. "I don't want to cry again." "You already did," Jasmine said gently, "and that's what makes you brave." Meanwhile, 2 rows back, Marcus Kelly, the freelance journalist who had quietly recorded the earlier altercation, was staring at the footage on his phone. It wasn't shaky. He had captured Shannon's words clearly, the disdain in her voice, and the moment her foot struck the portfolio. He hadn't meant to get involved, but something about the silence afterward, the way no one said anything, had lingered in his gut. He opened Twitter, typed, "Flight attendant kicks young black girl's art case, sneers at her tears. Passenger stays silent. Not proud of that part. Here's the footage." He hit upload. Then everything changed. In less than 10 minutes, his tweet had been liked over 4,000 times. Hundreds of retweets, dozens of replies from people demanding accountability, tagging Sky Nova, calling it out for what it was: racism, cruelty, a symptom of a deeper problem. Marcus stared at the screen, stunned. He hadn't expected it to explode this fast. Back at the JFK terminal, chaos had begun to swell behind closed doors. In a secured operations room adjacent to the Sky Nova customer lounge, 3 executives huddled around a screen as a PR manager clutched her phone like it was a grenade. "Sir," she whispered to Doug Hanley, VP of Corporate Operations, "there's a video going viral. A flight attendant kicking a miner's bag. It's already hit trending." Doug frowned. "Which flight?" 2121, JFK to Heathrow." He blinked. "The one still sitting at the gate?" "Yes." "Jesus Christ." She didn't correct him. She just turned the phone so he could see the video for himself. His face paled. "Where's Shannon Parker right now?" "Pulled from the flight. She's in secondary debrief." Doug rubbed his temples. "Okay, damage control. We issue a statement. Isolated incident, pending review, blah, blah." "Sir," the PR manager interrupted, "it's not just the video. There's more. Jasmine Carter is the mother." He looked at her blankly. Jasmine Carter, wife of Trent Carter. Doug stopped breathing for a moment. "Trent Carter of GE?" She nodded. "Oh, no." "Oh, yes." He stood so fast his chair toppled backward. "Call London right now." But they were already too late. Inside Skynova's corporate HQ in Manhattan, every phone on the executive floor was buzzing. Trent's acquisition firm had just purchased a significant block of convertible notes. Word was spreading that Skynova's ownership was in play, and the reason? A child's art case kicked on a flight by a dismissive flight attendant. Back on the plane, the tension was building. Shannon Parker, still sequestered in the gate office, sat across from two stone-faced HR reps and one legal officer. Her mouth was dry. "I'm not a racist," she said for the third time. "This has been taken completely out of context." "The video shows you kicking a child's personal property," the HR manager said coolly. "There are multiple witness statements confirming you were dismissive and confrontational." "She was in the way. She was 13. Shannon's composure cracked. "You're going to throw away my entire career over some brat with paint in a box?" The room went still. The legal officer closed his notebook. "Miss Parker," he said evenly, "the company is currently under external review, with potential for full acquisition. You're not just a liability anymore. You're the face of it." Shannon's voice cracked. "That's ridiculous. This is all politics." "Maybe," the HR rep said, "but it's happening. And as of this moment, your employment is suspended without pay pending investigation. Security will escort you from the premises." "No," Shannon whispered. "You can't do this." But they already had. And outside, just as ground crew began prepping for departure again, a new announcement came over the plane's speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the further delay. We've now been instructed to deplane briefly due to a procedural issue. We ask for your cooperation and thank you for your understanding." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Layla looked up. "What's happening now?" Jasmine stood slowly, helping her daughter with the portfolio. "I think someone else is getting kicked off this flight." And just like that, the passengers began to disembark, unaware that their flight wasn't just delayed. It was historic. Behind the scenes, the balance of power had shifted, not because of lawsuits or protests or press conferences, but because a mother had refused to let her daughter's dreams be stepped on. And because a man with resources and rage had decided enough was enough. Somewhere inside the web of terminals and tarmacs, a woman named Shannon Parker was realizing too late that respect wasn't optional. And Jasmine Carter was just getting started. Jasmine Carter stepped off the aircraft with calculated calm. As the jet bridge sealed behind her, she paused only long enough to make eye contact with the gate agent, a young man whose nervous hands were clutching the boarding manifest too tightly. "Where's the gate conference room?" she asked. The man blinked. Right this way, ma'am." As she walked, Layla's hand stayed firmly in hers. Neither of them spoke. The weight of what was unfolding settled into Jasmine's shoulders like a storm cloud, but her expression never cracked. This wasn't the moment for fury. It was the moment for precision. Inside the glass-walled conference room near Gate 34, 3 people were already waiting. Lisa Harmon, the JFK Flight Operations Supervisor, Brian Shaw from Corporate HR, and one more, someone Jasmine hadn't expected. Miles Decker, Skynova's Deputy Chief Counsel. He stood when she entered, a frown etched into his forehead. "Mrs. Carter," he began, his voice overly formal, "we appreciate you taking the time." "I didn't come here for courtesy," she cut in. "Let's not waste each other's time. Where is Shannon Parker?" Lisa cleared her throat. "She's being escorted off the premises." "That's not enough." Brian raised a cautious hand. "Mrs. Carter, I want to assure you that we're treating this matter with the utmost seriousness. We've initiated an internal investigation and plan to—" "Your plan is irrelevant," Jasmine interrupted again. As of 38 minutes ago, my husband began executing a series of leveraged acquisitions that will give Carter Global Enterprises majority influence over your parent company. What happens next isn't internal, it's structural. The room fell silent. Even Miles looked taken aback. Lisa slowly sank into her chair. "What are you saying?" Brian asked, his voice thin. "I'm saying the days of your airline brushing off misconduct under the guise of procedure are over," Jasmine said. "I'm saying Shannon Parker isn't just a symptom. She's a consequence of a culture that tolerates pettiness and prejudice as long as it stays quiet enough." Miles straightened his tie. "You're suggesting a hostile takeover?" "No," Jasmine said smoothly. "I'm informing you that it's already begun." She pulled out her phone and placed it face up on the table. On the screen was an open text thread from Trent. "Control confirmed. Board shift in progress. Legal notice filed. Standing by." Miles stared at the screen. "You're bluffing." Jasmine didn't even blink. "If I were bluffing, you'd still be boarding flight 221. Lisa leaned forward, voice quiet. "Mrs. Carter, what do you want?" Jasmine exhaled slowly. "I want accountability, not statements, not platitudes. Real change. And it starts with acknowledgement, publicly. Your flight attendant didn't just kick a child's bag. She kicked a child's confidence, a child's art. And she did it while wearing your uniform." Brian's voice faltered. "We'll issue a statement, immediate termination, public apology. We'll cooperate fully." "That's a start," Jasmine said, "but it's not enough." Lisa hesitated. "What else?" Jasmine turned to Layla, who stood quietly beside her, still gripping the bent portfolio. "Sweetheart," Jasmine said softly, "can you wait outside for a moment?" Layla nodded and stepped just beyond the glass door. A security officer, sensing the shift, stepped closer to keep watch. Then Jasmine returned her gaze to the table. "I want training for every single frontline staff member. Not a memo, not a slide deck. Real cultural accountability. And I want your CEO to say Layla's name in that statement." Miles looked uneasy. "That might be a stretch. There are legal implications." "Do I look like I care?" Jasmine replied. Silence. Then Lisa leaned forward again. "We can make that happen. And," Jasmine added, "I want Shannon Parker barred from working at any airline under the Sky Nova or Altura Aviation umbrella, permanently." Miles opened his mouth to protest, but stopped himself. He'd seen what corporate power could do in theory. Today he was watching it unfold in real time. "I'll draft the order," he muttered. Jasmine stood. "Good. My husband will be here shortly to address your board. I suggest you be ready." She opened the door and rejoined her daughter. The terminal buzzed with a strange energy. Passengers from Flight 221 lingered in clusters, some refreshing their phones. One man was live streaming on Instagram, murmuring, "Looks like the flight attendant's already been removed. This is wild. Something big is happening." It was about to get bigger. As Jasmine and Layla made their way toward the VIP security corridor, they were intercepted by Marcus Kelly, the journalist. "Mrs. Carter," he said, holding his phone awkwardly. "Sorry, I'm the one who posted the video." Jasmine regarded him coolly. "I hesitated. I didn't know if it was my place," he added quickly. "But I saw the way that woman treated your daughter. It didn't feel right to stay quiet." Jasmine's expression softened. "You did the right thing. Sometimes silence lets injustice grow. You broke the pattern." Marcus blinked. "That means a lot coming from you. Wait, do you mean, are you—" "I'm just a mother," she said. "But yes, my name is Jasmine Carter." His jaw nearly dropped. Wow. Okay, thank you. Thank you for not just letting it go. I couldn't, Jasmine said. My daughter was watching. Layla squeezed her hand. As they passed the rows of onlookers, murmurs followed them like a tide. Jasmine didn't turn back. She didn't need to. Behind her, the wave had already started, and ahead, in a private executive lounge being prepped for an emergency board session, Trent Carter was reading the real-time press coverage and waiting for his moment. Skynova was no longer an airline preparing for takeoff. It was a brand mid-freefall. And Jasmine Carter, she had just lit the match. Trent Carter stepped out of the black SUV and into the private tarmac entrance of JFK's Terminal Phi, flanked by two of his legal team and his personal advisor, Kendra Moore. The air was thick with the low rumble of jet engines and tension. Flight 221 is still grounded, Kendra said, tapping her tablet. Skynova hasn't dared push for takeoff until they know your next move. Smart. Trent's jaw tightened. They should have made smart moves before my daughter had to cry on a commercial flight. He walked briskly through the terminal, drawing stares from security, airline employees, and a few sharp-eyed passengers who began to realize who he was. His presence wasn't flashy, but it was undeniable. The kind of presence that made the temperature in the room shift even before he spoke. In the executive lounge conference room, Skynova's interim board was already waiting. The faces were familiar, some of them once powerful, now visibly strained. As Trent entered, a hushed silence swept over them. Douglas Hanley, the VP of Corporate Ops, stood up, trying to reclaim the room with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Carter, we weren't expecting you to arrive in person quite so soon. Trent didn't smile back. That's probably why you're still here. A few of the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Let's get to the point, Trent said, taking the seat at the head of the table that no one dared dispute. You know what happened on Flight 221. My daughter was disrespected by a crew member, and your airline tried to handle it with the same spin machine you use for broken luggage and late arrivals. That was a mistake. We issued a statement, Hanley said carefully. We terminated the employee. We're prepared to offer a public apology. And I'm not here for an apology, Trent interrupted. I'm here for responsibility, which is something you clearly stopped practicing years ago. Mr. Carter, spoke up Rachel Lynn, Skynova's chief financial officer. With all due respect, we understand your anger, but leveraging your influence to force a corporate overhaul, this isn't about influence, Trent cut in. It's about values. And right now, your airline has none. I've reviewed 6 years of internal complaint records. Dozens of misconduct reports involving frontline staff never made it past middle management. There's a pattern, and it's not just incompetence. It's willful neglect. Rachel's eyes widened. How did you get access to those records? Trent turned to Kendra, who gave a cool nod. Our holding firm acquired several unsecured data assets when we purchased a 17% stake through convertible debt last year. You didn't read the fine print. Hanley paled. You're saying you've been preparing this for months? No, Trent replied calmly. I wasn't, but you left the door wide open. All I had to do was walk through it. The room went silent again. Then Trent stood. I'm not here to dismantle Skynova. I'm here to rebuild it. But make no mistake. This isn't a partnership. This is a pivot. Effective immediately, Carter Global Enterprises will be installing a new interim CEO. You'll work under her supervision until a permanent restructuring plan is approved. Hanley's voice cracked. You're replacing us? No, Trent said without hesitation. You're replacing yourselves, slowly or all at once. That choice is up to you. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were non-negotiable directives. New codes of conduct, whistleblower protections, and a mandatory retraining initiative for all staff, top to bottom. "And the name of this new interim CEO?" Rachel asked, almost bitterly. The door opened. Jasmine Carter stepped in, dressed not for a photo op, but for war, impeccably tailored blazer, calm fire behind her eyes. "She's standing right here," Trent said. The room erupted. "You're appointing your wife as interim CEO?" Hanley barked. "That's a conflict of interest." "No," Trent replied. "It's a correction of one." Rachel looked from Jasmine to Trent and back again. "She's never run an airline." "She doesn't need to," Trent said. "She's run organizations with more complexity, more integrity, and a fraction of your dysfunction. And frankly, she gives a damn about the people who fly in your planes. That alone puts her 10 steps ahead of anyone in this room." Jasmine's voice rang out, steady and clear. "My daughter was humiliated, but she'll recover. What I care about now is the hundreds of passengers who walk onto your planes every day not knowing if they'll be treated with dignity. That ends today." "Or what?" Hanley asked. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Or I bring every damning piece of your suppressed complaint records to a press conference in Times Square," she said. "I let the world see what your version of customer service looks like." Rachel's hands shook slightly. "What do you want from us?" "Your cooperation," Jasmine said. "Your seats will remain, for now. But only if you help implement the change instead of resisting it. Help us build something better, or step aside." The silence that followed wasn't just agreement, it was resignation. Later that day, as news broke that Carter Global had taken operational control of Skynova and appointed Jasmine Carter as interim CEO, the internet exploded. The video of Layla's mistreatment, now paired with footage of Shannon Parker being escorted out by security, lit up every feed. And in the middle of it all, Jasmine gave a brief press statement from the JFK media podium. "No one should ever feel small at 30,000 feet, she said. "Today is the beginning of something different, not just for my family, but for every passenger who's ever been ignored, insulted, or made to feel invisible." It wasn't just a corporate win, it was a cultural reckoning, and the plane hadn't even left the ground yet. Shannon Parker sat in the back seat of a rideshare car heading toward her sister's apartment in Queens, her crew badge still dangling from her lanyard, like a nameplate from a war she'd just lost. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop, but she hadn't looked at it since she was escorted out of JFK under the watchful eye of airport security. She had hoped it would all blow over. A warning, maybe. A union rep stepping in. The usual dance. But the tone in that room, the silence, from her supervisor, the look on Lisa Harmon's face when she said, "She's not just a passenger, Shannon. She owns you now," had landed with finality. She opened Twitter, almost against her better judgment. Her name was trending. There, at the top, a shaky yet perfectly damning video. Her foot pushing the art case, her dismissive tone. The child's broken voice saying, "You kicked my bag." And then the headline from a major news outlet, "Billionaire's wife takes over, airline after daughter mistreated by flight attendant." Shannon felt the color drain from her face. They hadn't just fired her. They had made her the symbol. Back at Skynova headquarters, Jasmine stood at the edge of the conference room, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. Below her, the city pulsed as if unaware it was now watching a public reckoning unfold in real time. Behind her, a whiteboard was covered in red marker. Phase 1 Implementation Plan. Passenger Bill of Rights. Whistleblower Safe Channels. Cultural Accountability Framework. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was Layla. "She's on FaceTime," Kendra said, entering the room. "Wants to show you something." Jasmine's expression softened as she took the phone. Layla's beaming face filled the screen. "Mom, guess what? The judges emailed early. I got into the top 10. Jasmine felt a surge of warmth rise in her chest. "You did?" Layla nodded furiously, her curls bouncing. "And they said my work had heart, even the one that got scratched. I fixed it. Kind of. It's got this rough edge now, and I left it. It looks real." Jasmine smiled. "It always was." Layla looked thoughtful. "Is it weird that I'm kind of glad it happened? I mean, I hated it, but now, I don't know, it's like people saw me." "Baby, it's not weird. It's brave." After the call ended, Jasmine turned back to the room, her focus sharpening. The moment was sweet, but the fight wasn't over. "Where are we with the apology rollout?" she asked. Kendra glanced at her notes. "Draft's been approved by legal. CEO signature pending. Press conference scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Make sure it's live-streamed. No closed rooms, no soft language. We say her name. We say what happened, and we say what's changing." Across the city, Marcus Kelly, the freelance journalist whose video had kicked the media firestorm into overdrive, sat in a coffee shop near Union Square, fielding calls from 3 major networks. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. His inbox was filled with messages, people recounting their own horror stories with airline staff, many from women of color, many from single parents or elders or people with disabilities. The message was clear. This wasn't a one-time incident. It was a pattern, and now the world was watching. But just as things began to align, something unexpected landed on Jasmine's desk. A manila envelope. No sender listed. Inside, an anonymous typed letter and 3 printed emails from a private internal Skynova server. Each message detailed Shannon Parker's involvement in a quiet but systematic practice of passenger intimidation and lost baggage replacements tied to a specific group of gate agents. The implication was clear. This wasn't about one incident. Shannon had been protected, maybe even encouraged. Jasmine sat back in her chair, her mind racing. If these were real, Skynova's rot went far deeper than PR failures or culture gaps. It was corruption. Kendra stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. "You think someone inside sent this?" "I know it," Jasmine said. "Someone's trying to clean house from within." "So what now?" "We investigate. Quietly, but fast. If there's a ring involved in harassment or theft, I want names. And I want those names out of the system before we finish week 1. Meanwhile, Shannon paced her sister's living room, staring at her phone as another notification pinged in. An anonymous account had posted something new, a screenshot from a 2019 internal complaint. Passenger reported Shannon for yelling at her for not speaking English fast enough. Unfounded, the record read, signed off by a name Shannon knew too well, her former supervisor and longtime friend. Except he no longer worked at the airline either. Word was he'd been quietly pushed out last week. "They're scrubbing everything," Shannon muttered. Her sister, reclined on the couch, barely looked up. "I told you not to mess with people like that." "It wasn't about that," Shannon snapped. "It was one mistake, one moment." "Maybe," her sister replied. "But when enough people say the same thing about you, maybe it wasn't just one." Shannon didn't answer, because deep down she knew. The cracks had always been there. She had just assumed no one would ever bother to look. Now, with every hour that passed, more light poured in. More stories surfaced. Old reports, buried complaints, suddenly mattered again. And the new leadership wasn't just reacting, it was hunting. Jasmine Carter, once the silent partner behind a global empire, was no longer silent. And Skynova, once known for cheap routes and colder service, was about to become the center of an aviation revolution. Not because someone planned it, but because someone kicked the wrong bag, and someone else decided the sky was too big for silence. It had been 72 hours since Jasmine Carter officially stepped in as interim CEO of Skynova Airlines, and already the walls were starting to groan under the pressure of long-ignored truths. The PR department was in overdrive, HR was scrambling to locate records once thought buried, and legal counsel had gone full defense mode. But Jasmine, she wasn't focused on optics. She was focused on overhaul. She stood in the center of a packed employee town hall meeting at Skynova's main operations hub near Newark Airport, surrounded by over 200 staff, gate agents, flight attendants, baggage handlers, and junior supervisors. Every eye was on her. "I'm not here to deliver a sanitized corporate message," she began, her tone firm but clear. "I'm here because your passengers are tired, and so are you." There were no teleprompters, no marketing fluff, just her. "I've read the files," she continued. "I've seen the rot, the cover-ups, the retaliation against employees who spoke up, and let me be clear, we're not patching a system, we're building a new one." In the back row, a young Latina gate agent named Rosa raised her hand. "I've worked here 6 years," she said. "I filed 3 reports about a certain supervisor who made racist remarks to both passengers and staff. Nothing ever happened. Are you saying that's going to change?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Yes. And that supervisor? He was let go yesterday." A low murmur of surprise swept the room. "I'm not here to win popularity," Jasmine added, "but I am here to win back your dignity. You can't serve passengers with pride if this place makes you feel invisible." Back at headquarters, Kendra Moore and her internal audit team had just wrapped up the first phase of a deep dive review. What they found wasn't just negligence, it was a culture of weaponized silence. Supervisors who quietly moved problem employees from one route to another instead of disciplining them. A shadow system of flagged passengers, many of whom had simply dared to complain. Complaints marked resolved when they'd never been investigated. The rot ran wide. And then the twist. During the review of archived employee files, the audit team found something no one expected. A whistleblower report filed 2 years ago by a now retired flight attendant. The report directly accused Shannon Parker of orchestrating a scheme with a handful of other crew members, selectively losing the carry-on items of non-white passengers during lightly booked international flights. It had never been followed up on. The supervisor who received the report, the same one who'd signed off on multiple complaints as unfounded. Kendra called Jasmine the moment she saw it. "This was bigger than a bad attitude," Kendra said, voice tight. "It was targeted, deliberate." Jasmine's breath caught. "I want names," she said, "and I want confirmation. Were passengers ever reimbursed?" Some were, most weren't, but here's the worst part. We found logs where Shannon personally signed off on final baggage checks. We've got signatures and timestamps. Jasmine stood in silence for a beat, staring out her window. "Call legal. We're issuing a referral to the Department of Transportation, and I want criminal counsel on standby. This isn't just corporate misconduct anymore. It's theft, and it's racial targeting." Back at her sister's apartment, Shannon watched the news unfold in real time. She was no longer just fired. She was under investigation. The story had reached the national wires. Headlines read, "Former Skynova flight attendant at center of criminal probe," and in smaller print beneath, "Cultural reckoning at 30,000 feet continues under new leadership." Shannon sat frozen, hands clutching a chipped coffee mug. "I didn't do anything criminal," she whispered to no one in particular. Her sister raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" "I wasn't the only one," Shannon muttered. They all knew. Everyone knew how it worked. But only your name's out there, her sister said flatly. And now they're turning on you. Shannon opened her messages looking for any sign of support. Nothing. No union contact. No former colleagues, just silence. No, not silence. Abandonment. And it hit her all at once. How quickly a system that protects you when you're useful can discard you when you become inconvenient. Meanwhile, Jasmine held a closed-door meeting with Layla's school art director, surprising even Kendra. I want to sponsor a nationwide youth arts program, she said. Not for PR, not in my name. In Layla's. The director's eyes lit up. You mean full scholarships? Scholarships, supplies, exhibitions, a touring showcase across underserved communities. I want kids like my daughter to know they belong in the sky, in galleries, on runways, wherever their dreams take them. Layla didn't know about the foundation yet, but she would. Jasmine knew the change they were making wasn't just inside the airline. It was in every passenger who'd been ignored, every crew member who'd swallowed their voice, every young girl clutching a scuffed art case, thinking maybe she didn't matter. The world had seen what happened when power met cruelty. Now it was seeing what happened when power chose accountability. And Sky Nova, once a cautionary tale, was quickly becoming something new. A second chance. With altitude. 6 weeks later, the Sky Nova airlines that took off each morning didn't look or feel like the one that landed 6 weeks ago. The livery had changed slightly. Same logo, same colors, but the tail now bore a new motto in subtle white lettering beneath the company name. Respect in every seat. Inside, things had changed even more. Gate agents greeted passengers by name when possible. Flight attendants were no longer rushing through safety demos with robotic tones. A warmth had returned not because they were told to smile, but because for the first time in a long time, they were being heard. In the corner of Sky Nova's newly renovated customer training center in Atlanta, Jasmine Carter stood before a fresh group of new hires. This was the 5th onboarding cycle she'd opened personally since taking leadership. Most CEOs didn't show up for these things, but Jasmine did, every time. Before we talk procedures, she began, I want you to understand something. No one boards a plane hoping to be tolerated. They hope to be seen. That's what people remember. Not just if their flight was on time, but if someone made them feel human. She scanned the room, her gaze steady but warm. You have the power to change someone's entire day with one moment. The question is, what will you do with that moment? There was a pause, then the kind of quiet nodding that said they got it, not just in theory, but in their bones. Meanwhile, halfway across the country in Dallas, Layla Carter stood nervously in front of a modest stage at a community arts center. Her portfolio had been selected for the inaugural Art Rise Youth Showcase, a traveling exhibition funded by the Carter Foundation. She was wearing a navy blue blazer, her curls pinned up, and a tiny gold charm around her neck that read, Create. When her name was called, she stepped up and addressed the crowd. My piece is called Damage Done, Beauty Remains, she said, holding up a painting of a bent galaxy, one edge frayed, the other blooming with vivid color. I made it after something really hard happened. Someone treated me like I didn't matter. But instead of hiding it, I painted it. Because sometimes the thing that breaks you also shows you what you're made of. The audience applauded, but more than that, they leaned in. They saw her. Later that night, Jasmine sat beside Layla in a quiet booth at a diner just outside town. Their server brought them cherry pie and lemonade, and they split it without needing to ask. You were brilliant today, Jasmine said. Layla blushed. I was shaking. You didn't show it. Layla poked her fork into the pie. Do you think people really change, or are they just scared of getting caught? Jasmine thought about that for a moment. Some people don't change, she said. They just go quiet. But others, they wake up, they learn, they grow. Like the people at Sky Nova? Jasmine smiled. Some of them, and the ones who didn't, they're no longer with the company. Layla nodded. Good. Jasmine leaned back, taking in the moment. The world hadn't been fixed. There were still rude flight attendants, broken systems, people getting stepped on. But something had shifted, and it started with one little girl and a kicked bag. The irony wasn't lost on Jasmine. The moment they tried to push Layla aside was the moment Layla pushed the world forward. Meanwhile, back in New York, a woman named Shannon Parker sat alone in a cramped hearing room, facing disciplinary review. Her attorney's seat was empty. He had withdrawn representation 2 days earlier. Across the table, a representative from the Department of Transportation read the list of charges aloud. Gross misconduct, passenger intimidation, racially biased behavior, obstruction of internal investigations. There was enough for federal review, maybe even jail time. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stared at the table and realized finally that her moment, the one where she could have done something decent, something human, had come and gone, and she had wasted it. One kick, one smirk, one destroyed career, one revolution. Later that week, Sky Nova posted a video titled "The New Sky Begins Here." It featured footage of real employees, mechanics, call center reps, baggage crews, sharing how the company had changed. At the end, Jasmine appeared briefly on screen. "No company is perfect," she said, "but when we choose accountability over excuses, change is possible. And when we listen, really listen, we give dignity a place to land." The screen faded to black. Then a final message. This story was brought to you by Voices Unheard. If you believe stories like this matter, if you believe silence is no longer an option, subscribe, share, and help us keep these voices alive. Because sometimes it only takes one voice to break through the noise, and sometimes it only takes one story to change everything.